welcome. You're listening to a special episode of TOI Bookmark for Author Awards Season 7. Author Awards is an initiative of JK Paper with the Times of India. I'm the host, Jaya Bhattacharji Rose. It is with great pleasure that I welcome Paromita Vohra. Paromita is a filmmaker, writer, and committed Antakshari player. Her body of work includes kinetic and intensely sensuous films, online videos, art installations, and television programming. These explore feminism, gender, desire, urban life, and popular culture. She is the director of several documentaries, including Unlimited Girls, Q2P, and more recently, Working Girls. She has written the film Khamosh Pani or Silent Waters, the comic Priya's Mirror, the play Ishkya Dharavi Ishtail, and a weekly newspaper column called Paranormal Activity, which she wrote for 15 years. In 2015, she founded Agents of Ishq, a pioneering digital platform which has transformed conversations on sex, love, and desire in India. In fact, we are here today to discuss the anthology from this website called Love, Sex in India, The Agents of Ishq, edited by her. Welcome, Paromita. Welcome to TOI Bookmark.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Entirely our pleasure. Gosh, I've been wanting to talk to you for ages. I know we chit chat off and on, etc., but it's still not the same thing. This is different. This is different. You've done something absolutely miraculous with this anthology. But before we get into that, what exactly is Agents of Ishq?
So, I mean, it's hard to describe what Agents of Ishq is, but very simply, it began in 2015 as a kind of sexuality education program or a project, sorry. But it was more that, there were a lot of conversations about sexuality around us, but most of them were about sexual violence. And they didn't, I think, provide enough of a navigational method to make sense of your sex life and to think about. Uh, Sexuality, desire, and your own self, especially if you were a woman or a queer person, outside violence, risk, and danger. And at the same time, as you know, I'm a filmmaker, but I've also worked in multiple forms, and I like to play with forms. And social media was relatively new, and I was very interested in trying to make an art project on the internet. I just didn't know what that could be until social media came about, and then I thought, okay, I will make this project to talk about sex, love, and desire. I will make it so that people can think about sexuality outside this frame of violence, disease, and risk. And also because a lot of conversations on sexuality online were very determined by American things. So you even had people using very American terminology like vajayjay and coochie, and it just was a little alienating, and I think a very small segment of people speak like that even today. So I thought something desi, something Indian, something that people here can relate to, and something that would be immensely fun, pleasurable, and would create a feeling of apnapan, something that would be a place everybody can come into, an inclusive frame. It doesn't matter if you have never had sex. It doesn't matter if you're very experimental, if you're kinky, if you're polyamorous. There could be one space where everybody could enter and participate. So that's how Agents of Fish began. It had a lot of material on sexuality, consent, queerness, safe sex, all of these things. But I think what was most notable about AOI was it had this language, which was not just that it was English, but it was very funny and sweet, and the kind of filmy, and the images were very beautiful. Like, we really wanted the images to be gorgeous, tactile, look handmade, because I think that we are not used to seeing sex in those settings. We always think of sex as part of pornography, or it's not normally presented to us in an atmosphere of ease and beauty and fun. So I think when we launched Agents of Ishq, we just thought that we would be making these videos and we would be putting out content, which is what people do online. But within a day or two of launching the website, we began getting these emails from people saying, I too want to be an agent of Ishq. So I think the idea of being an agent of Ishq was very alluring, but it was also very inclusive, because ishq is a word we all know. Even if you don't speak Hindustani, everybody in India has heard the word ishq from various like Himesh Reshammiya songs or whatever. Ishq means both love, desire, passion. It has a very open ended kind of meaning. And I think because it's not defined what it means to be an agent of ishq, people started making their own definitions, and everybody had a different definition. And amongst these ideas of what it means to be an agent of ishq were people sending us narratives about their own intimate experiences. I mean, I think that when they saw AOI, they felt this is both desi, it is comfortable, it is non judgmental, it is non prescriptive. Here, my experience will be treated with love and affection, and I can speak about my confusions, but also what I have learned from my own sexual and romantic explorations. So people began sending us all these stories. We were not really prepared for it, but we thought it was an amazing outcome. And we just somehow mobilized ourselves to start editing, to think about how to present them. We began translating them into Hindi. And the more that we put out these stories, the more people would start writing in with their own. And again, remarkably, it's not that you put out a story about your first crush or your first heartbreak, and that all the stories which came in would be about crushes and heartbreaks. No, people would write about completely different experiences. So I think, yes, Agents of Ishq then in time grew from being a sexuality education project with a kind of interest in popular culture and being part of the popular culture to becoming something very community created, where the audience itself began to determine the source, the content, because they decided what their stories were about. We never solicited any stories in, under any topics. Um, Audiences began to participate in the comments and ask for things to be on the website. So I think today, 10 years down the line, Agents of Ishq is like a really a big co-created project about what it means to be Indian and sexual out there on the internet.
Well, it is a vast repository of information from these very uh, even the essays are a wide range of writing styles. Some are very intimate. You almost feel as if you are eavesdropping onto somebody's interior monologue. You know,
Mm,
it may not be presented as one, but the intimacy that they display in their writing, um, you feel like an intruder. Okay, but at the
mm,
same time your website has so many resource materials. And interestingly, your even when you categorize the different kinds of articles that can be sourced, you it's a mix of straightforward sane information on how to share. Because let's face it, talking about sex and love in India continues, despite the internet boom, etc., does continue to be a bit of a taboo. So to read something in quiet is it makes all the difference. Hey, come on. That's why E.L. James' 50 Shades of series became such a rip-roaring success with with the smartphone, because people were
mm,
able to read erotica without having to let on that they were. And here you're giving
mm,
them information. So it's a very interesting repository and a very interesting art project, ongoing
mm.
live art project.
Yes,
So
it is. I mean, I think it's in a kind of limitless project in that sense, right?
yeah.
Because it's not as if there is a fixed end. Like sex is a part of life, and it's something. Sexuality education is a lifelong thing. People are always learning about themselves through intimacies. They're always. I mean, sexuality is an area which can surprise you. uh, you may think you know who your type is because a dating app tells you that you have to decide who your type is before you meet the person, but in reality our inner lives are infinitely surprising. We may find somebody attractive that we never thought we would. We may desire something that nobody has told us to desire in the past. So I think in that sense it's an sexuality itself is a limitless repository of life learning. It's just, while yes, the idea of sexuality is taboo everywhere. And even when people say it's okay to talk about it, they prescribe very specific ways in which you can talk about it, right? Like now, there is a fashion to say that, oh, everybody must want to have a lot of sex, they should be happy hooking up, and they should be polyamorous. That's what makes them a modern sexual person. But I don't think that it can be so narrowly defined. The most important thing about Agents of Ishq is we really stay away from any categories. You will
Yeah.
notice in the book as well that the stories are not categorized by topic, like, oh,
No.
people are coming out, or these are all stories about violence, or these are all stories about heartbreak. No, the thing is, there's a certain quality to experience and a quality to learning about life that the stories give us, and so they are also categorized in that way. Within friendship there are complexities. Within romance there are there's learning and relearning, right? Like what you're conditioned to think about, and what you discover you'd rather have. So I think that while there may be some sense of what is taboo and what is permitted, in real life, people live outside all of that and inside all of that, I suppose. So what the stories really reveal to us is that there is an India that people don't write about. There is an India that people don't recognize is there, but it's there. There are all kinds of people. They wish for all kinds of things. They have all kinds of sexual experiences. And what's most beautiful is that they feel that they want to share them with others. When they share their story, they are not merely wanting to express themselves, although there is part of that. They're also wanting to make sense of their experience. And they're also wanting to join a kind of community conversation about this part of life which remains shrouded and which we don't have a vocabulary to discuss. So I think that, Agents of Fish actually doesn't bother about the idea of taboo. We don't act like anything is taboo. We don't speak to the taboo. We don't try to break the taboo, and we don't endorse the taboo. We just act like it doesn't exist. And I think when you do that, when you stop all the time relating to the notion of taboo, or you stop relating to the notion of what is forbidden or allowed, and you just ask, what is your experience? It liberates people. It liberates you to say that no matter what my experience, even if it doesn't fit anywhere, here is a world inside Agents of Ishq. My experience does not have to fit, it just has to be. And I can share it with others. And I think there's a wisdom in that, right? So I think that's one of the important things about storytelling. And I do agree that, for instance, information. We don't have sexuality education in schools. There isn't a lot of information out there. And of course, the internet has information, but after you get information, you have to make sense of it. And second, information has to be helpful and true to life. So, for example, when people tell you about contraception and they tell you what is safe sex, I think it's good to have somebody holding your hand and explain why one kind of contraceptive is good for one circumstance and another for another situation. So, I think Agents of Ishq imagines itself in that way as an affectionate embrace that we accompany people on their journey to understand these parts of life and even to seek this information. So it's not about, okay, I gave you the information and now automatically you'll be fine. But the understanding that information also keeps needing to be updated, and that knowing about safe sex is perhaps as important as knowing how to talk to another person on a first date. It's as important to recognize that people feel very awkward about getting naked in front of another person, to recognize that experience and suggest some ways to be more comfortable. I mean, Agents of Ishq has articles about how nice it is to cuddle and how many kinds of cuddles there are. It has articles about the idea of Mubole family. So there are also many terminologies that we use today, like chosen family, and it makes it sound as if this was never there and that Indian culture is only one thing. But there have always been chosen families in our culture. So in some ways, we also like to join the old to the contemporary, to find the connections between what is already there in the culture and what it is that people seek. I think it's very important to be shown another world so that you can actually choose it.
More than that, it is not about just about showing another world. It is a way of seeing what already exists and not being prudish and not and as you rightly said, accepting. And that is the sensibility which comes through this book, that you actually bring in articles and you let people speak for themselves in a manner that they say, hey, this is life, it's evolving, it's taking us into these spaces. If we want, you don't even use words like, oh, it's a one night stand or something, which are derogatory. It is an acceptance of this. Now you can, as a reader, you can judge if you wish to. That is entirely, but the beauty of the way these essays are structured And I'm sure you had a way had an editorial influence in that, because I can't imagine everybody writing well structured essays and their voices coming through. The diversity that you have is something I'm so sure you had. It made me think if you're a good listener, because you get those rhythms and you get the variety.
So, I mean, I have to say that, there have been also many editors working at Agents of Ishq over the years. And in a sense, it's very collective, the editing process. They are doing it, I'm doing it with them, we're doing it in tandem, etc. Sometimes there hasn't been anybody, like during the pandemic. I edited all the essays because we didn't have anyone. So it has varied over these 10 years. But I will agree with you that there is something to the quality of deep listening that I have learned from being a documentary filmmaker that I could really bring to Agents of Ishq. For me, I mean, I think of Agents of Ishq as an endless documentary film in which, yes, there is information, but there's also stories of people. There are individuals, there are collectives, there are concepts, all of that. And it's kind of being made on the spot by the people who are writing, by the people who are drawing. Because even for each story that we have, we ask a different artist to make the drawings. It's not like we only have an in-house style and that's applied to all the stories. So we try to keep the diversity present in as many ways as possible. But it's true that we evolved an editorial framework bit by bit. Um, when the first stories came, it's not like we had an editorial plan, but we decided that, like, actually we evolved the editorial guideline while editing, like on the go. Now, I think when you're a documentary filmmaker and you interview people, one of the things that you learn to really listen for is what is the meaning somebody is trying to convey through what they're saying. It's not just about the words that they have said, but trying to sense their larger worldview that you want to communicate through the interview that you edit. The other thing is sometimes you interview somebody for 2 hours, but your interview is only 7 or 8 minutes long in the film. And that 7 or 8 minute interview should evoke the 2 hours without, not just compress them, not like edit them down and make a pressy, but kind of be like stand in for those 2 hours. So I think there was a lot of practice that I got for 25, 30 years before AOI in just listening to interviews, learning how to edit them in this way so that, like something about the person's texture comes through. That the person is not just there as a kind of conveyor of instrumental information, but is a whole person on screen. The way they tilt their head, their turn of phrase, their way of laughing, just the whole feeling of being in conversation with them should be evoked on screen as well. So I think when the story started coming in, what was wonderful is that people were not trying to be posh, not trying to write as per a notion of how writing should be, but they were just writing. Sometimes it was incoherent. There were pieces that came in that sometimes we had to like take apart to determine the chronology of what happened, like because people were just writing stream of consciousness. They felt very deeply about what it was, and this was especially true in the first 5 or 6 years when there was no precedent for a thing like Agents of Ish. So it was completely new. So I think of the people who sent their stories as very pioneering themselves, no? Because I mean, what made them think that I can set my story here? There was no precedent for anybody to do that. Then they would all come from very different parts of the country, so they had different kinds of English, and that was beautiful because different kinds of English, the sound of different Englishes, the use of words from your own language, this is how we speak every day. This is the language that expresses our emotions, our histories, our individual biographies. And so to sanitize that language into something, some kind of sameness would have been the opposite of what we were trying to do, right? Because we are saying every experience has its own validity and every experience teaches us something and expresses something of who we are. So we really worked to to make it as lucid and understandable as possible to a reader. And we did ask that there should be a narrative arc, but we were always there to help the writer to achieve it. Sometimes the writer was not fully able to express what it is that they were feeling. So there is a kind of therapeutic aspect to this, right? That like putting in questions within their text. Why did you feel this way? Do you think you could have done something else? Or do you feel differently about it today? And in this back and forth on email with all these people, many of whom we've never met, a story would develop, and then we would not edit it right at the start as if we know what its end is. So there was more asking and listening, and then shaping the story. Of course, we had many people writing in who are born writers. There were some stories that we hardly ever changed a word or two, like I came out to my mom and now I think she's homosexual. I took a nude selfie, it changed my life. Like these writers, the pieces were perfect, and really there was not even a comma to change. So sometimes it happens, but a majority of people really, they don't see themselves as writers. They're going to write the story once and they may not write something again. And yes, the other stories, like say I have erotic friendships and it's not complicated, which is an essay about erotic relationships between gay men and straight women, was a very unusual story. And the writer was an interning at Agents of Ishq at that time, so it helped because we would endlessly talk about it. They would go out, they would do interviews, they would come back, they would think, they would write, but because the topic itself was so uncommon and the experience itself so nuanced, it took us time to actually create a structure. And I think it's been a big learning experience for me to work on these narratives. I've learned a lot about people, I've learned a lot about writing. I've learned a lot about what it is to actually co create. Because we do have a rule that we will not publish anything until it is mutually acceptable to both, to Agents of Ishq's team as well as to the writer. So we don't publish an unapproved piece ever, right? Um, One of the things that we really worked hard on, besides retaining the voice of the writer, the language of the writer, uh, whatever the regional inflections of the narrative, we also worked very hard to make the stories non-prescriptive, to, to make them non-judgmental. So we would alter language if it was judging others. Like, I'll give you an example. I joined Grinder, and everybody knows Grinder is for losers. This line we would change to, I joined Grinder, it made me feel like a loser. So we didn't want to tell the person who's feeling like a loser, oh, you shouldn't be a loser. No, you shouldn't feel this way. We're not here to tell you how to feel. This is what you felt. We respect that. But you can't really speak for others and what their actions mean. So that making sure that language is not violent to others, but to do this without sanitizing it. So I think that it's meticulous work. It's a line by line kind of work. I wish everybody could have editors like that. Actually, I would love to have an editor like that. So, yeah. So I think this is how the style of editing evolved. And story now we have some guidelines, but each piece is different. To be honest, each piece is different. Each piece asks something different from us. Yeah. So we also have to we have to really gather the tools each time afresh. Also, to be honest, and that is what is so exciting about it.
No, that absolutely comes through. In fact, I was wondering, because you've been doing this for a little more than a decade now, AOI, Agents of Fish. Has there been a difference in the qualitative difference in the submissions? Because as you pointed out a little earlier, into 2015, the internet was new, the so smartphones were new, everything was new, and there was a kind of a sense of boldness and a desire to share. Today, we are in a space where, because of the information boom, and also for the last 2 3 years, because we're in the AI age with the AI bots, etc., partnering up, etc., and offering, bots giving you relationship advice. Has it in any way uh, maybe tempered the quality of the submissions?
Yes, I think there has been a change for many reasons. Some of them are the reasons you state, but not only that. I mean, I think when Agents of Fish started, because there was nothing like it before, people were not writing in any with any formula in mind, right? They were just writing, and that's why I say that they are the people who also co-made Agents of Ishq, because in a way they dared to be that which nobody else has really told them to be. Um, in the years, especially like around the pandemic, like around 5 years into Agents of Fish's existence, a lot more people started doing this work. And the idea of sexuality influencers and talking about sex became much more prominent on the internet, especially on Instagram. Now, the thing is that approach is a little bit more prescriptive, right? Like on AI, we are not really saying this is okay and that is not okay. But out there in the world, there is a lot more prescription and there's a lot more language, there's a lot more jargon. I think one of the beautiful things when we started AOI was there was no language, so we were making up our own language, but we were not making that language in order to write a proposal for funding or to create laws. It was a language to express life and how it's being lived and emotions. And the fact that most of the words for sex were considered to be dirty words or abuses, but we were looking for sweet words to talk about the body. So we were doing it along with, like, we did this map of kisses, right? We asked, what's the word for kiss in your language? And it's one of our very popular maps because we did a lot of maps over the years. But the idea that it's umma in one language and chumma in another, it creates a nice little sweetness, but it normalizes this idea of the kiss. It makes it a concept you can love rather than a concept that makes you like titter or giggle in embarrassment. So I think a lot of that got replaced by a kind of jargon. And we did in the last few years, it is frequent that there will be submissions that one already fit themselves into a pre existing experience. It's like experiences have been made into formulaic experiences. This is what it means that you are like this. If so and so. There was a wonderful piece that came in. It's not in the book, it's on the site. It's called If He Does That, He's Just Not Into You. And it was a piece about how this woman was so tired of judging her own relationship through all the stuff about red flags, which was spoken about on Instagram. Now, I think like we would agree that some of the things that we now speak about, behavior types of people, um, therapy speak, it's all rooted in some reality, and it's important to understand that. But when you start living your life by that terminology, and when you start fitting your experience into that meaning, then you're not living by your own meaning, right? You're allowing the pre existing meaning to determine the meaning of your life and also decide how you feel about yourself and others and what you think you can have in your life. Now, the whole point about something like an Agents of Ishq or any other such project is that you wish to liberate yourself from the pre existing frames that tell you what is right and wrong, good and bad, and to develop your own ethical framework, your own understanding of yourself, and somehow try to actualize that understanding of yourself in your life. But if we are going to replace those old frameworks with just a new framework that is as constricting, then I don't know how liberating it is. So I think that is something we have noticed, that more and more pieces come that are fitting themselves into a pre existing, like a kind of departmental store of emotions and experiences. Sometimes within those stories there is still an experience that actually you can see that if this person doesn't write with all this language, something very beautiful will emerge. And we do try to work with those writers to shape the story in a way that is more human and more true to their experience than true to some terminology and jargon. But I think it is a tough one now.
It is because social media also enforces all these expectations, and is, the swirling around of jargon is evident across sectors, across everything. And in fact, I kept wondering whether now there is increasingly posturing and saying, "Okay, look, I can do this, and I can put this out. These are my words." Whereas earlier there was a kind of a freshness, and you just shared an experience. And in fact, in fact, I was reading somewhere the other day that Scott Galloway, for instance, has said that violence and hate sells more better than sex on tech platforms. So in a sense, if there is a sense of scale or priority, it's okay to talk about sex because it's hate and violence which the algorithms are going to push in your face in order to benefit whoever it is it's meant. Plus, it's only in recent years, that in the last couple of years, that we've begun seeing in mainstream newspapers in print the conversations about sex toys, etc. In fact, I think the Indian marketplace is projected to be worth $2.09 billion by 2030, which means that there is a certain sense of acceptance, openness to this. And one more, I kept wondering, while you're doing all of this, Paromita, how has it impacted you as a person, as an individual, and as a professional? How has it affected your art, for instance?
Hmm. I think it's true that now there are businesses and there's a kind of sexual wellness industry, sexual wellness complex, even you can say. Yeah, so there's it's made up of it's made up of influencers, of companies, all kinds of things. But pleasure is not a new discovery, and I think people have always looked for pleasure. I think we have all growing up seen those cousins and uncles and aunts who were much more sensually comfortable, who expressed affection for each other in different ways. Look, we've grown up with Hindi film songs that are that it's a whole encyclopedia of desire. There are so many versions of sensuality in Hindi film songs. There's the very raunchy double meaning. There is the very delicate metaphor. There is eroticism. There is longing. There is yearning. There is flirtation. Everything. It's always been there all around us. So I think in some ways you reconnect to that part of what it is to be an Indian. And pleasure is a very, very expansive idea. It is not only about having sex in a physical way. It's part. I mean, having physical sex is a part of pleasure, but so is language. So are endearments. So is food, poetry. All the things that give you pleasure actually are all interwoven. And I think in that sense, they are part of erotic life, because those memories and those textures and those smells and sounds make up your entire nervous system, so to speak, and lead you towards greater pleasure, right? So I think it's always been there. And for me, as an artist, I've always wanted to make work which privileges that pleasure, because I think that pleasure gives you autonomy. When I make a film, if it's pleasurable, you, the audience, I respect you. I feel that you, as an audience, I need to treat you well. And I always say this, I say it often, that I think of making art as inviting somebody home for a meal. And if I were to call you home for a meal, I would want to give you the greatest pleasure of the meal. I would want to make it beautifully. I would want it to look good. And so it should be with art. And it should give you that autonomy as an audience member to disagree with me, uh, or to agree, but not to be lectured, not to be indoctrinated, but for us to have a conversation. Actually, I think of art as a way to have conversation with large numbers of people, and conversation is about people interacting as equals, not about the artist being at a level above someone else. And in fact, the artist also learning continuously from the relationship with the audience. So I feel, for me, Agents of Ishq has, I mean, it's taught me a lot, because first of all, doing work in such quantum every single day, you are writing, you are making, you are editing. I have not worked so much in my life, and I feel it's very important. Artists should do more work. I believe art is done in the doing. I'm not one of those people who makes it a very esoteric process. I believe कि जितना आप काम करोगे उतना आपका हाथ साफ होता जाता है. You become fluid, you become relaxed, you understand forms. That is why when you listen to somebody's way of writing, when you understand the cadence of their emotion as well as the sentences that they are making, you're able to give space. It would be no good if everything sounded like me on age. It would be horrible, actually. but the thing is that to receive with pleasure another person's way of speaking, thinking, making, and to join your own skills to that. I mean, that is the meaning of life, if you ask me. It's like a huge table that we sit at together. So I think as an artist, it has reduced my artistic ego a lot, but it has given me a lot of artistic muscle, because it was very hard work on Agents of Ishq. Again, work without precedent, so you really have to learn it as you do it. You have to be very honest. You're putting stuff out online. We are not chasing the numbers in that way. We always wanted it to be an oasis of beauty and thoughtfulness and affection, and keeping it that way. But at the same time, you want to reach people, you want to communicate to people, so you have to be very honest in your work. You can't just write some jargonistic lecture. Like, we don't use the word problematic on Agents of Ishq at all. Like, if something is problematic, it's better to explain what the problem is and not just denounce it as problematic. So, all of this, I think, as an artist, it has made me, um, it has matured me as an artist. Like, to be able to do things with fun with a larger number of people. I think that the new film that I've made, Working Girls, in a way, I couldn't have made it if I hadn't done Agents of Ishq for 10 years. The truth of the matter is, I couldn't have made Agents of Ishq if I hadn't made all the films that I had made before. I wrote a weekly column for 15 years. It's a short column, it was in a tabloid. So, that is the other thing that I think as an artist, when you work in the popular form, and you work in the popular space, but you're not like, I mean, I'm not writing romance novels or Chetan Bhagat kind of novel which is saying I'm a popular novel. Like, I am still doing my slightly intellectual arty thing, but I'm doing it in the mainstream space. I've loved that. It has taught me a lot. Most of all, it has taught me that you do not know already what the audience is. The audience can also surprise you. When I started writing Paranormal Activity 15 years ago, I did not think I would write it for more than 6 months. And one of the reasons I thought I couldn't was because who wants to read what I'm writing? Like, I'm so like, oh, who's this feminist chick who loves the roses and Shah Rukh Khan and Hindi film songs, but loves feminism, loves history, loves politics. Like, there isn't really room for that kind of character. You're always being told you're a little marginal, it's very niche, it's nice, but that's not how it went. I mean, what the readers taught me, the way they wrote, made me understand my own self and made me feel much less alone as an artist. But I do know that in the world of writing, arts, cinema, all of that, people like me do occupy a peculiar place, right? Because to work with the popular and to try to reach people in a popular form is slightly looked down on. Topics like sex, popular culture, etc., like they have become more acceptable, but they're not considered to be A-list topics. So you're always kind of inhabiting that in-between space, which is absolutely okay because it's a pretty exciting space. But yeah, I think that one thing leading to another. That is love, right? Like that's how love happens. One thing leads to another, and that has been my artistic journey. Like, I made films, and then I ended up writing a column, and the column led to me making another kind of film, which led to me making Agents of Ishq is very much informed also by that popular love. Like, the plenty of it is like many Hindi film songs or like many articles in a magazine. Like, it has that kind of magazine fun. And I think that it's important to create these kinds of forms which are inclusive of people, right? Which are not about hierarchies.
But I have to say, just before we close, Paro, that you may call yourself inhabiting a space which is not A-list and is sort of considered infra dig and all of that. But the truth be told, we need, we need individuals like you who have this artistic flair and are unabashedly confident, full of joy, and have this joy that we to make visible that which already exists. The very fact that you chose to do, say, a map of kisses, for instance, and you made visible language. When a language has words for all that you say, how it means that the cultural sensibilities exist. It's just it's just a modern age looking down that we considered infradig, really. So thank you.
No, absolutely. There are a lot of binaries and hierarchies through which people view the world, right? And I say that when you ask me also what Agents of Ishq has done for me as an artist and as a person, I would say that both the writers, the audiences, and myself, and all the people who worked on Agents of Ishq, because I always worked with a team and colleagues, I think that it's a kind of
Yeah.
journey of self acceptance. I mean, the audience is accepting themselves, but I too am accepting myself as the kind of artist I am. And lastly, I want to say there is a line in a Hindi film song, a very old Hindi film song, which goes "Badli teri nazar to nazare badal gaye."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really that, right? That if you look different, the world will look different if your gaze changes. And I also always say that feminism, if you have to define it, it's about the look of love on things which have been considered not important, on stories which have been considered insignificant, and you look at them with the look of love, and suddenly it's revealed to you what their significance, their beauty, their depth, their wisdom, their radicalism actually is, and what kind of world they make possible for us to live in. So I think like these, and art itself, art exists to liberate the human spirit. It exists to dignify human experience, and it exists to connect us to each other. I mean, art is
Exactly.
about connecting ideas, connecting people, and connecting us to ourselves most of all. And I think that actually that is what it is that makes acceptance possible. You cannot accept yourself without accepting others, and vice versa. There's no linearity there. It's an endless circle of life,
That's
really.
so beautifully said, Paro. Thank you so much for being on the special episode of TOI Bookmark. Lovely, lovely
Well,
talking
thank
to
you.
you.
Thank you for having me here.